Hello everyone, welcome to panel 1 of GAIN CTRL. My name is Claire Holdsworth, and I'm a writer and curator, and I'm going to be moderating this panel. I'm also a member of SODAA Collective, who've co-curated and organized this event with Threads Radio. Technical difficulties. And then today, GAIN CTRL, the whole event is, like a series of different, we're going to start with 2 panels, and then we're going to have some AV shows and then live DJs later. But the whole idea of tonight's event is to explore this idea of the new futures of kind of collective space and organization. So we're going to kick that off with this panel, which is called A Right to the City, the Urgency of Community-Run Spaces. And we've got all our lovely panelists here. I should apologize because one panelist couldn't make it. So yeah, we're sending them all our best. Babetheory couldn't make it from Misery Party, but I can always talk a little bit about the party and Babetheory a bit later as well. So thinking about today's topics, everyone's going to talk for about 5 minutes. We've got a series of different people who've worked with different spaces and projects in London. And everyone's kind of inhabiting spaces, taking spaces, buying spaces, trying to buy spaces. So everyone's going to talk a little bit about their individual projects. But I think one thing that's quite important for everyone to think about in this context, because it is London, like in kind of urban landscapes, they're constantly changing. They're these sort of transitory spaces. They change a lot based on the communities and the people that live there. But one of the most important and critical aspects of how those spaces change is connected to land ownership. So there's always a politics inherent in all land ownership, but inhabiting space is also an inherently political action. And everyone here is really looking at new models, new ideas. And one thing that we're all dealing with, even though GAIN CTRL is kind of about this idea of the new futures, is we're all working with this moment, so this sense of urgency right now. So everyone here is doing things, working towards something. Generally, we're looking at, obviously, GAIN CTRL and SODAA Collective and Threads more broadly. We're connected to music and music culture, but a lot of venues and spaces and organizations bring together a lot of different aspects. So it might not just be music, it's like art, culture, community support events, etc. So we're going to be exploring some of those today. So right now, everyone's going to speak for about 5 minutes, and I'll introduce all our panelists individually. And then at the end, we're going to have a sort of discussion. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what everyone has to say. You don't have to ask a question. You can have a comment. If you think of another project that's really cool or interesting, that's doing interesting work, that's relevant, maybe you think of a book. It's up to you. But we'll just invite multiple responses from people. So please feel free to, say and join in as you see fit. So our first panelist is Sean P. Houghton, who was formerly a member of DIY Space and makes music under the name Vanity Crystal. And we're going to talk a little bit about their experiences so far. Yeah.
Hello. So the space I was involved with was DIY Space for London, which was based in South Bermondsey and was open for 5 years. It's no longer open, and I was one of many volunteers. So speaking on its behalf is a little strange because there's like thousands of people who are involved in it. It was a volunteer-run space. So I guess I'm going to kind of run through how we did it and what I personally learned from it and what I personally gained from it. So we did a lot of boring admin, basically, opening a space is a lot of boring admin. We fundraised starting in 2012, which was before I was involved. And with the idea of opening a members club, there's similar models that exist, like Wharf Chambers in Leeds and the 1 in 12 Club in Bradford were 2 big inspirations. Operating as a non-profit, so we fundraised 30k, which was including 6,500, which was a grant from Lush and a grant from Edge Fund, and then we spent a really long time hunting for a venue space. Originally, we almost had a space based in central London. Apparently, this is before I was involved, but it's kind of wild to think that we could have had like a DIY space like slap bang in the middle of like Tottenham Court Road, basically. So yeah, we signed a 5-year lease in 2015, opened in September of that year, operating about like 25k a year in rent that like went up to 28 and then 30. And basically how we had to run was secure an alcohol license, because that was our primary sort of means of making money, which obviously like is not amazing in certain ways, but it's sort of like the way it is at the moment. Yeah, and we ran occasional sort of like late 10s licenses, which are like temporary events notices, so we could do like kind of later raves and stuff on certain weekends. And yeah, I would say that it, coming from that and also previously Power Lunches in Dalston, were both like really sort of like life-changing experiences for me in a lot of ways. It connected a lot of parts of London, different communities that I was not a part of. I kind of became involved with it in 2015 through like DIY punk stuff. And I noticed like kind of as more different collectives and crowds of people like came in, that was actually like the most valuable reason for doing it, was this kind of big mesh of community. Yeah, I would say that one of the kind of things that I think is an experience that most people who volunteered there would say was that burnout was very real, and a very real kind of danger of running like a volunteer run space where like no one was paid at all. The first 2 years were like pretty good. Like there was a lot of enthusiasm, but we sort of began to encounter like challenges in sort of the third year as people became like less and less available. We started to introduce like paid roles kind of much later in the space, but it was kind of like a little too late. Yeah, I think that is like a real trapping of doing this kind of space. And I know I've talked to people involved with SODAA who are very keen to kind of like immediately value people's time. Like, unfortunately, like London is a very busy city, so like people need to be sort of remunerated for their time in some way, I think. And when you're doing that for free, there's only so much energy before you go. Yeah, I think there were like a bunch of really interesting things that came out of it that still exist. We have like Decolonise Fest, who was involved with it. First Timers, which is a fest where every band plays their first show. That collective is still running. It actually started prior to DIY Space, but I think it really thrived in the space. You might know like Big Joni were a First Timers band. They're signed to like First and Moore's label and Kill Rock Stars in America. We also have like Print Collective at Turf Croydon, who came out of the warehouse space. They were a screen printing studio, and now they're like a risograph studio in Turf Croydon. And Tome Records in Hackney were also originally a record space there. Yeah. I don't really know what else to say, if I'm honest. Happy to pass over.
So next we're going to hear from Lenny, who's from Sister Midnight, who've been running different campaigns to buy different spaces after having their own record shop and performance space in Deptford. And she's going to update us, because I think things have changed a little bit the last couple of weeks as well.
Yeah, it's definitely an ever-changing picture. That would be one of the biggest learnings from doing these kind of projects, is just be prepared to adapt constantly. But yeah, so Sister Midnight started out as a record shop and a music venue that I started back in 2018. It was a tiny little space tucked away on a back street in Deptford, but it was amazing. We had such a strong community around the space and so many exciting, creative and cultural things happening there. Unfortunately, when the pandemic hit, our landlord lost an interest in maintaining the infrastructure of the space, which resulted in biblical floods from above and sewage from below, which damaged most of our equipment and stock and made the space completely unviable to stay in. So we decided that we would leave, but it wasn't the end, and we were going to come back and do something bigger and better. And I think at that point, we had a lot of time to reflect about how we could make Sister Midnight more sustainable and more viable long term, because we didn't want another scenario where we were in a building with a landlord who didn't really care about us or our business or what it meant to the local community. And also we had experienced a lot of burnout. I was working pretty much as the sole member of staff 6 days a week, barely getting paid, and it got to a point where I realized that for it to be sustainable, it wasn't just about finding the right space, but it was also about finding a business model where my labor and other people's labor would be valued and treated in an ethical way. And through kind of like thinking about all these things and thinking about the way that the space had historically existed, like with the informal input of our community, we decided that that was something we very much wanted to formalize within our business structure. And that was how we landed on the idea of becoming a community benefit society, which is a type of cooperative that's owned and democratically controlled by its members. We just felt like that was the most optimum model for us, because it put power back into the hands of our community and meant that like ultimately how that space was going to be run would be up to them. And that's what we wanted, because we knew that they are the people that know best what they want from a venue. It shouldn't just be up to a small number of people at the top making all the decisions. So we found a space that we wanted to buy freehold, and we launched a big campaign around it. To date, we've raised about £285,000. But unfortunately, we couldn't proceed with the space that we had originally intended to. It's a beautiful pub on Lewisham High Street in South London. But the owners wanted to sell it for about £1.2 million more than the market value. And even if we'd had like £3 million just sat in our bank account and we could afford to pay the building, I think there's like a really big ethical question around how we use public funds and shareholders' funds and community investment, like raised money to just give someone £1 million plus of private profit. It just seemed insane. So unfortunately, we had to kind of put that idea aside, and we're now looking at a new space. We've been working with Lewisham Council to identify somewhere in our local area, and hopefully going to have more news that we can talk about that publicly in the coming weeks. I'm looking at Sophie, who's my co-founder of System of Night, in the audience there. We can't say too much, but we're dying to. But this is a space that we won't own. We'll just get it for a few years as an interim space. And it's quite a sad reflection, really, on the state of the London property market, that a group of essentially like 3 people could raise £250,000 plus in less than 6 months, and that's still not enough to get us a permanent space. It's that hard. The barriers are so high to finding just space to exist in. So I think like a lot of our big takeaway from doing this has just been the London property market is really, really messed up. And that stakeholder relationships with local authorities, with property developers, even if you don't want to have those kind of relationships, are unfortunately essential, because they are currently the people who hold power. And so to kind of decentralize that power and bring it back into the community, you've got to play their game a little bit. So it's a difficult climate, but what has made it worth it for us is just the support, like completely unconditional support that we've had from our community. And that's not just local people, from organisations like Co-ops UK and Plunkett Foundation, who work in the community sector, who've given us funding and time and support and advice. And it's just been great to be part of a movement that is so focused on solidarity. And I think like the idea of having a solidarity economy within the music industry is something that we all need to be talking about more and pushing more, because no music venue or no cultural space really like exists standalone. We're all part of an ecosystem, and we all need to flourish, like for everyone to survive. So I think that's something that we have always thought and that we want to like push out there, is that we need to be supporting each other as much as possible to make it better for everyone.
Thank you very much. So our next speaker is Sinha. He's going to be talking about Respace Projects, who ran a couple of temporary projects in venues, namely the Hive in Dalston. And then now the organization's developed to sort of assist and help people create the infrastructure and the networks involved with using temporary spaces in London, but also working with other groups to use and inhabit those spaces. So.
Thank you very much. But before I start, I'd just like to say I'm very grateful to be sat here on the panel, and it's amazing to hear the different directions and routes that people have taken to arrive to fundamentally the same sort of conclusions. You know what I mean? And So yeah, we've been operating since 2015. I think we've run 9 projects in 7 different locations or something like that. And they've all been meanwhile-based projects, and we've done a lot of learning along the way. And I hope you don't mind, but I'd like to read something to you, because we are entering some very interesting times. So let me start. So some of you may have heard of Respace, many will not, but almost none will know what respacing is about. Now, I started this journey 10 years ago from a squatted bedroom. The people there saved my life with acceptance and with community. And I resolved then to find a way to preserve those things against a rising tide of inequality. Now, 7 years ago, we went legit. And we've created inspiring and award-winning projects with virtually no money around the country. And we've gained both reputation and credit, but mostly we've learned a lot. And what we've learned is that respacing is not about space. It's about you and me. It's about we, and it's about us. We've learned that it's about learning from the past to tackle the challenges that we have today, whilst preparing for challenges that we are yet to face. The cost of living, climate, emergency, energy, water, and food. Now, the we is all of us who won't have help. Those who won't be protected from these challenges by corporate institutions or corporate industries and dodgy politics. We are on our own. But we're not alone. We have each other. And we live in an age of abundance, where we watch much of that wealth go up in puffs of smoke, get poured into the sea or buried underground. There is a disconnect, and Respace was designed to bridge that gap, to create an infrastructure of support and resources that can empower every single community to protect and use that value to help themselves and each other. A couple of weeks ago, I went on a trespass organized by Right to Roam, to gather around an old oak tree on what was once common land but is now owned and enclosed by Lord Richard Benyon, the current Minister for Access to Nature. Now, they called for a restoration of ancient rights, to gather, to share, and to communicate. The right to land is mirrored in our rights to the city. And with ancient rights come ancient responsibilities. In virtually every culture around the world, through major disasters, when the system failed to protect those most vulnerable, it was those communities with people's kitchens, with communal cultural facilities, with a social infrastructure that saved thousands of lives. They stayed to help each other, and so more survived. The old social contract, where we traded our rights for our security, is terminated, as today's politicians sell our rights to corporations for their security. It has always been thus, but in the face of the current climate, in so many more ways than one, we face the biggest challenge of all. United we stand, divided we fall. Now, we all know this, and we are a remarkable species capable of the greatest feats of innovation, technological solutions, new systems, new models. But in the context of a social system designed to divide and atomize society, we are isolated and divided over which network to join, which model to use, which app to download. Now, we can do this, we can get together, but we need to do it fast. Like in the old days when villagers would come together to build a barn for all of their grain ready for the changes in season, we need to move fast. Now, to do that, we're going to need an infrastructure, ways to move materials, ideas, and knowledge around, physical and digital crossovers, systems and apps that work together. So, this September 2022, we are launching the Recover Plan, putting together all of the learning and all the acquired knowledge of hundreds of years into 9 straightforward steps to birth a fully autonomous, highly enabled, powerful, self-regulating network of organizations spanning social boundaries across all levels that will build this infrastructure piece by piece, as fast as humanly possible. Now, this might all seem far-fetched, but just as someone once told me that you can't get buildings in London for free, well, we can. And it all starts with an alliance based on trust, honesty, and ethics. Building itself, forming itself, becoming what it needs to be, where it needs to be. Now, with all of our work and that of hundreds of volunteers for thousands of days, we hope we've earned just a little bit enough trust for people to want to learn more about it. So please, join our socials, keep an eye on the Recover Plan, tell people about the Alliance, and then join it when it launches. It's just going to be £1 a year, forever. In the days to come, there will be many, many flags to rally under. But instead, let's all make a flag of many colours. We may be on our own, but we don't have to be alone.
Thanks very much. So our next speaker is Izzy, who's part of the Friends of Joiners Arms network. And obviously, I think some people will be familiar with their campaigning. Maybe she will talk about it a little bit as well. But the Joiners Arms is a legendary LGBTQIA venue in London that closed. And then there was different issues with the developers and a campaign by this community group, which came up. And then it's also shifted a bit lately as well as the campaigning's happened and the politics of negotiating all the different spaces have come about. But I'm sure she's going to tell us a bit more about that. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I'm Izzy, pronouns are they, them, and I'm from the Friends of the Joiners Arms, which is also a community benefit society. And that basically means that we invest any profit that we make through any activity we do back into the campaign and eventually back into the space. And I'll tell you about that in a bit. And we really rally under the sentiment and the feeling that no one should become richer off the backs of the queer and trans community. And just a caveat, Friends of the Joiners Arms uses the term queer as a radical word which encompasses the widest range of sexualities and gender that we have. So I'm just going to give you a quote from Bell Hooks on this term. Queer not as being about who you're having sex with, though that can be a dimension of it, but queer as being about the self that is at odds with everything around it and has to invent and create and find a place to speak and to thrive and to live. So the Friends of the Joiners Arms operates for marginalised members of the queer community who are underrepresented in existing spaces. Our community-run pub will be a queer, not-for-profit, later licensed and fully accessible space that provides opportunities for socialising, performance, jobs, and also funding for community services. Friends of the Joiners Arms came into existence in 2014 with the closure of the Joiners Arms, which was a legendary gay pub on the Hackney Road. So our campaigning experience has given Friends of the Joiners Arms detailed knowledge about the workings of planning processes in East London, all the boring admin stuff, and the threats that are posed to queer spaces. So Friends of the Joiners Arms actually is no longer about saving the Joiners Arms as it once was. It closed 7-8 years ago, and we know that that space is lost, and it wouldn't be right to try to regain it again. So now we're about building something new and something that serves the community as it is now, using the energy and the inspiration taken from what was the Joiners Arms. We've transformed into an organisation that's passionate about protecting and creating queer spaces. And we've chosen to use the robust community-run business model. Why do I say it's robust? Because a staggering 99% of community pubs survive within the first 5 years of opening. You compare that to small to average sized enterprises, which have a survival rate in the first 5 years of 44%. That's according to the Plunkett. The queer space will be community organised and operated, and the structure will take precedent from other community-owned pubs like the Bevy and the Ivy House, which is just down in Nunhead, with day-to-day operations being run by paid staff. As has been said, volunteers can only do so much. We need to be paid for our work. So since 2018, Friends of the Joiners Arms has been running a bi-monthly cabaret night called Les Majest in venues across Hackney and Tower Hamlets. And we've done some special shows elsewhere as well, including South London and Devon. So yeah, we're taking it everywhere. So these nights celebrate and centre queer women, trans, non-binary people, and platform Black and POC performers and DJs. Les Majest Nights have been instrumental in creating the much-needed inclusive space for marginalised members of the LGBTQ+ community, and also offer a snapshot of what the future space will provide, as well as allowing us to test ideas and develop and gather feedback from the community as well. So as the revenue of Les Majest has increased and we've increased in our popularity, we've taken advantage of our not-for-profit model by increasing fees given to performers, and also by creating other paid opportunities, like starting to pay stage managers and mental health first aiders. As of spring 2022, we have BSL interpretation, live captioning, and audio description at all of our shows. Additionally, in 2019, we worked with the Outside Project, which is a homeless shelter for LGBTQI+ people, to run two sober cabaret events, which we called Les Majest, the Sober Kingdom. And that really allowed us to explore sober events and how we can use the space to provide not just what you'd get from a traditional pub of like boozing, but what else we can do, which reaches a wider audience. So we have long-term goals of opening a permanent community, late license, community-run accessible venue that will replace what the Joiners Arms once was and what was lost. And after a series of undelivered promises from the developers, when they said they'd give us the space, and it's still sitting closed. Then they said they'd give us 100,000 to open a meanwhile use space, and that hasn't happened. So in June, we took it into our own hands, and we started a community share sale process to raise £100,000. And that will give us the funds to open a meanwhile use space for the next 5 years. And that will build on the inclusive queer network and foundation that we've built up with Les Majest over the past few years. And it will give us more freedom, more ability to reach more diverse audiences without being limited by other venues' decision-making and what their priorities are. So our intention is to offer a space which will actively works to lower barriers of entry. So keeping drinks prices low, offering bottomless filtered coffee, and not expecting people to make a purchase while they use the space, while also using the revenue generated from higher spend to cross-subsidize in the lowering of the barriers. Our share sale practice reflects this, in that we're keeping the minimum purchase price of a share much lower than the average community share sale at only £25 per share, and allowing people to purchase pay-it-forward shares, which are then given to people who otherwise wouldn't be able to afford to buy a share at this time. So during the share sale process, we had a target of 100,000. We're now on just short of 125,000. So we did it. And we are also getting a 25k boost from the Community Shares Booster Fund, which means that this October we should be opening our Meanwhile Use space. Woo! And all those people who have bought shares will have a say in how it's run and what goes into the space. We're working with the Queer Architects Collective, so decisions about not only what happens in the space, but what that space is from the start. There's still 3 days left to buy shares. So if you haven't already, there's time, and then that's all of our shareholders, and there won't be any more. So get on it.
Thanks, Izzy. So obviously this is a nice opportunity. Maybe we should all get involved right now. So we've got about sort of 20 minutes to have, as I said, like questions, of course, but feel free to have comments, thoughts, to say how you feel. Just make space for others and keep them succinct, if that's possible. So we only have a mic with a cable. So if anyone wants to ask any questions, can I ask you just to come round here? Maybe we could make a little line. I don't know if you might mind moving the chair to the side a little bit. But yeah, just come round here and we can do it through the mic so that it can be heard on the live stream as well. If you're super self-conscious, you can shout it and I can repeat it back. But definitely some interesting ideas were coming up there. And I was thinking a little bit about the title of the panel today, which is this idea of the right to the city. And obviously, like, our ideas and approach to the city is changing, but definitely this idea of kind of spatial inequality is a real problem as things are shifting, and especially with the different models and value systems that people already have in place. So definitely, I think all these projects, what they're doing is they're kind of looking to the future, but they're really like working on the ground now, doing a lot of like important work to, change those values, change these systems, and really like addressing spatial inequalities, like not only noticing them, but doing something about them, which I think is very powerful. So do we have any questions or comments? Whilst everyone's thinking, did you have any questions for one another?
I'm really interested in how large all of your sort of like core organizational group is, and sort of, I guess, maybe the pros and cons of the way you work, because they're all quite different, and also quite different to my experience of being involved with DIY Space, which would be kind of like a core group of people that could fluctuate in size, training other people, and then sort of like entrusting those people to also run the space, which was like really great, and I think really expanded the kind of people involved, but became quite stressful as we were like running out of people. So I'm just interested, like, with all of you in the process of like kind of setting something up, like what that's like.
So obviously we're in a little bit of a weird limbo stage at the moment where we don't actually have a space to run, but our core team is 3 of us. And we do have a group of larger volunteers who like form a community advisory committee, but that is very ad hoc advice and assistance, and although their support has been invaluable, really the people working day in, day out are just 3 of us. It's been great because I think our team is perfect and I love the people I work with, but it's also very high pressured work, and we could probably do with 1 or 2 more of us at times. And I guess like as we move towards having a space, I think as we grow the team, something that we are really focused on is building a workplace culture that allows the rest of the team to really feel empowered to do their jobs and to contribute to the space, because the less hierarchies, the better. And unfortunately, in our scenario, some hierarchies do need to exist because we have like £250,000 of local people's money, and someone needs to take the buck for like how that's spent and ensuring that like that is used in the public interest. But the less hierarchy, the better. And so we're looking at a lot of ways of like sociocratic working and like flat management structures and collaborative approaches that can help us to form a team that's just going to be really like cooperative in the way that they work.
Not to me.
Thank you. So yeah, with the Friends of the Joiners Arms, there are about 15 to 20 people that I guess have been really like carrying the campaign over the past few years. We have a management committee, which is basically like a formality, which is about 10 people. And again, with that, people come in and out. It's very fluid, and it's one of the things I love about this campaign so much is that if ever I feel like I need to dip out because I've got too much on in other areas of my life, people hold the space, and as soon as I come back and say, oh, I'm up for this, there's no holding on to sort of, no territorialism, which is amazing. So yeah, I'd say sort of like around 10 people who are very active at one time, then with sort of another 10 who can swap in and out, which is really helpful. But this will change as we open the space, because now we've got over 1,000 shareholders who are really going to be like, previously it's been the management committee has been the official highest decision-making body, but now we have the shareholders, it's going to be them. So that has shifted over, and then also with hiring a paid team, they'll have a different structure as well. But for now, around 20 people, 10 going at full force at one time. Yeah.
I will after you.
Yeah, just to say like kind of what was being said there about like all the different groups that have like different decision making powers and like just like ways of working within a society, like particularly in sort of cooperative societies like ours. Just establishing like really sound governance processes is so important. I think we spent, how many weeks was it, Sophie? Do we want to say like 6-8 weeks talking about governance processes during the campaign? Yeah, we've considered them from like every angle. We're exhausted of talking about it. But finding like the appropriate way for like power and decision making to flow through your organization is so important, not only in the sense of empowering people to have a voice, but also ensuring that like that democracy is kept to like working in a way that is efficient, because cultural spaces are like so high pressure to run, and there's like things going on all the time, and if you have 1,000 members of your society, they can't all be voting on who's going to clean the toilets on a Wednesday afternoon. It just makes it impossible. So it's like a really difficult thing to find that balance of, you want everyone to have a say in an input, and you also want to make sure that staff have like that authority to do the jobs that they have been hired for. So it's a tricky thing, but if anyone is thinking of starting up like a cooperative or like community run venue, that would be the thing that I would say dedicate the most time to, is just figuring out that power balance.
That was awesome advice. Yeah, the reason I passed up on your question first time round was because in some respects, for us, it's not about the core organisational teams, because we're a meta level process. So having run different buildings in different areas for different tasks and different purposes, we've used different hierarchies and different models, and even in the same project, done several different models to test it all. Because the key to it, as far as we're concerned, is that there is a really strong track record of what different people have tried in different areas, and that's available to us all, to be able to try different models, see the work that you've already put in, the work that you guys put in, and you guys, so that we can make sure that there's less work for others to follow, so that they can see the models that we've put together, they can come up with their own. So in some respects, it's a situationally specific question. Yeah. But I do think that there is a generic answer, which is that no one's got the right answer. And actually, we're all just trying these different models to try and make it work in a system that's fundamentally undermining those models and making it harder and harder. And you're right. When a single organization takes over a space, whether it be meanwhile or long term, there's pressure and there is responsibility and there is risk, and there is danger, and the people whose shoulders that falls upon, as you said, sometimes can be surprisingly or extraordinarily few people. So we're very much about, hey, let's have a think about this. Let's think what would happen if a number of organizations co-collaborated to curate and to run and to manage buildings so that the responsibility was shared equally and fairly amongst lots and lots of different groups, all of the stakeholders in some respects. And then, through a process of good governance and a concentration on those sorts of things, and a real understanding of the value of connecting the local community to the project itself, then we can start to actually learn the stuff we need to learn to replace the stuff that doesn't work anymore.
I just want to add that all of those were like really amazing answers. Yeah, they were really good. I think I want to add something quickly about like hierarchy, which I think is a really interesting point about cooperative spaces, like full stop. And I think DIY Space for London was ostensibly a non-hierarchical flat structure, which on paper is like amazing. But obviously you realize very quickly that certain people have certain skills or certain responsibilities, and there starts to become a kind of hierarchy of just you become the person who's around the most, therefore you sort of amass more knowledge than someone who's coming in later. And I think it's really good to combat those things like immediately and not just kind of be like, yeah, it's non-hierarchical and everyone will come in at the same level, because like they just don't. I mean, like I was one of the volunteers who was often responsible for like, you know, training bar staff, volunteers, or at one point I actually did the SIA security course to be a security person, which was legally demanded of us at certain events. And like there's a hierarchy in that, because I went on the course and I have had the card to be a security person for like 2 years, which is like a lot of responsibility in a space that holds 160 people and a wide variety of events, some of which were late night where people were very obviously taking drugs, and you had to work out like how to manage that. So yeah, I think it's really interesting to state really clearly about like governance and like hierarchy and be knowledgeable about that stuff when you're opening new spaces.
That was an awesome point again. And I'd like to make a point about that, because I think that is one of the fundamental challenges that we face, is this idea of what is a hierarchy and what does it represent. Whenever we talk about temporary space and meanwhile, the first reaction a lot of people have in their mind is, but why isn't it permanent? Why can't it last forever? And then you think to yourself, well, okay, firstly, if you've got a problem and you want to solve it, you don't want something that keeps it going forever, number one. And number two, the idea of permanence is also an impermanent one, because we don't know how long we're going to be here. We don't know how long we're going to want to be here. And so the strength of societal architecture is in impermanence. It's in temporary, because that deals also with the problems of hierarchies. Because what it does is it says, well, okay, fight your way to the top, whatever. Take the piss. You do it. Next time, you aren't going to get another chance. In the next project, you might not even get in. And so the weakness that is perceived in temporary and in meanwhile use is actually its strength. Just wanted to say that.
Yeah, thanks so much for that. I think, again, there's a lot of practical issues going on, and it's really significant point, and I'm not sure anyone's solved it so much, is definitely this idea of labour and which responsibilities fall to which people. And I was quite inspired by what Izzy was saying as well, to do with the, how you can step out and step in. And I think that's something that really needs to be addressed, because there's a lot of invisibility to do with the practical aspects of putting on these events. And again, the reason we do it is like we can look at the end, because we make amazing music. The culture has like a super important impact on people, not just in like making communities, but also changing people's attitudes. And that could be from, art or music or anything. But a lot of the stuff that goes into those communities forming, those scenes happening, it's all invisible. And a lot of people don't actually value that. And it's actually really important work, because even you can look at even when you're working, lots of people work different way. They might have a creative thing at the end and reverse engineer it, but there's still a lot of practical processes you have to go through to put on a night. And definitely things to do with safety. I think the fact that we're all doing these projects and everyone's hyper aware of safety, but also awareness of other people's personal space, and these are really very important and key things to actually how we will build newer, different models and spaces, and how we will maybe sustain them, because, you know, a lot of the labor is devalued, but also a lot of the support for other people, like even those processes are really devalued within, you know, kind of, I guess, existing culture. I wanted to open it out again. If anybody would like to make a comment, please do. Yeah, come around.
Thank you for all the sharing. And I was curious, do you document any of the processes? Do you have anywhere where I know that internally you do that, but more broadly for other organizations, can we find some of your resources? Yeah.
I wish we had. we didn't have enough people or time or energy to document anything that we were doing in a way that was useful or would be useful for other groups to look at. And I think that's a real shame, and I wish that we'd been able to do more of it in retrospect, but you know, we couldn't have. We were already pushing ourselves to our absolute limits just to try and get done what we needed to do. But something that we are doing is training in cooperative development and as community share practitioners, so that we can help other groups to fundraise and work out their governance processes and establish themselves as co-ops and convents. I actually just helped Friends of the Joiners Arms write their share offer document, and that was like my first official share offer, so really pleased to see that one's gone well. It means everyone's doing something right, obviously mostly these guys. But I think that, yeah, sharing those skills and sharing that knowledge is something that we really want to keep doing. And so I'd encourage anyone in this room to get in touch with us if you want support or have an idea, because we're very happy to share all of our learnings. But unfortunately, we don't have a concise PDF that we can just email around to everyone. Maybe we'll get around to making one in the future. That would be good.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Yeah, that's why I was on my phone. I was just double checking that it was there. If you go on our website, the Friends of the Joiners Arms, you can find on there our business plan and then appendices of loads of supporting documents, where it's not exactly what you've asked for, but we've included all the research we've done, all sort of the supporting materials and the processes that we have been following over the past couple of years, and how we envision that in the coming years as well. So yeah, go there.
Yeah, so we have a number of impact reports that are available on our website, and a couple more still just about to come out, which will not so much document the processes of getting the buildings or whatever, but will document the ways and the different methods in which they've used to run those buildings, and the outcomes, because it's legacy and outcome that defines, you know, whether you've done a good job or not, that you want to be saying is impact. You know what I mean? But the question you're asking is actually the great question, because that's the one that says, how do we find out more, and how can we find a place where we can just get all of this information, and having your information and your information and about DIY space and Respaces all available in like a Google of good, where you can just go and it all comes up in one place and you can see it all. That's what perhaps we could be aiming towards, I think.
Yeah, I think that could be a really productive thing to do. I don't know if you guys want to shout out any other spaces and projects. We've got maybe 5 minutes left, so if anyone does have any comments or anything. I was thinking definitely other inspirational projects that are going on in London, like, for example, Rising Sun. There are a few other spaces. I don't know if you guys know the Mild May, which is actually a working men's club that's owned by shareholders in Newington Green. There's a few different models and different things going on. I wasn't sure if anyone had any to share or shout out. We'll get them all together. SODAA. Yeah, indeed. And any final comments? Honestly, it's fine.
I was just going to say, Claire, it's not exactly what you've asked for, but interestingly, Co-ops UK are actually making a map which maps out
great.
all of the cooperative and community-run spaces in the UK. So I know loads of spaces I would really like to shout out, but it's like when someone asks you if you want to put a song on and your mind instantly goes blank of all the music that you like. That's what I'm experiencing now, but there are so many. There's so many people doing great things. And Co-ops UK, I would say, is a great organisation for anyone who's thinking of starting this process, because they provide a lot of support, a lot of funding, and a lot of like resources and networking. So definitely hit them up.
Yeah, I just want to add on top of that and kind of repeat what I said, the two absolutely massive integral inspirations to DIY Space for London, and two collectives that were like a massive help to sort of explain how to do it, were the 1 in 12 Club in Bradford, which is an anarchist club venue that has existed since I think the 1980s, and Wharf Chambers in Leeds, which runs on the same cooperative model that we ran on, which was essentially as a members club. So you pay to be a member for like £2 a year, which is also how we fundraised a lot. I think we ended up with like over 800 members paying like £2 a year, which like £2 a year is not that much, but when it's 800 people, that adds up. Yeah, and I just want to shout out like Decolonise Fest, who kind of came out of one of the many things that was involved in DIY Space for London, and I think that they continue to do like really, really amazing work, and have had some real battles with like artists being sort of refused entry by UK Border Force and stuff. So if you can support them, yeah, I think that's like a really good way to go, on top of all of these guys who are doing like absolutely amazing projects.
That's great. So, I mean, to wrap up, everyone, thank you so much for speaking. I think we're going to keep these conversations going somewhere else. So, like, do watch out on Threads and SODAA socials. We'll maybe keep some of these ideas and conversations alive, get some other people involved, make the, you know, the document of documents. But yeah, otherwise, can you join me in thanking our panelists? Yeah, so now we've got a performance. What? Yeah, Graver Echo live in the hall, and then we've got another panel at 6:30 in this space here. Thanks.